In the painting, private property, the barren landscape stretches out under an expansive sky, dry and empty, marked only by a series of frail trees bound together by a delicate rope. The trees stand like sentinels, their bare branches reaching toward the heavens, their roots seemingly confined to shallow soil. One tree, closer to the viewer, bears a heavy stone tied to its base, anchoring it down, trapped, restrained. The land itself appears worn, fractured, etched with the scars of time. A subtle path meanders through the dust, perhaps a remnant of travelers who once passed through but now find themselves unwelcome. There is no fence, no explicit barrier, yet the title, private property, transforms the image into a symbol of exclusion. The boundary is not physical, but conceptual, an invisible force that claims dominion over space, restricting movement, severing connection. Yet, the presence of the rope suggests something fragile, temporary even. The trees do not stand as imposing walls. Rather, they seem bound unwillingly, participants in an arbitrary division of land. They remain rooted, yet disconnected, echoing the paradox of ownership. Who truly owns the earth? And what does it mean to confine something that was never meant to be contained? In Zen, ownership is an illusion. The land, the trees, the sky, these things belong to no one, for they existed before human hands laid claim, and they will endure long after. The very act of labeling something as private creates suffering, for it introduces separation, where there is none. The stone, tethering the nearest tree, is symbolic of attachment. It is held in place, bound to the earth, restricted from moving freely. In Zen, attachment is the root of suffering. It weighs us down, much like this burdened tree. The others remain bound together, but their movement is not as restricted. Are the trees protectors of this land, or are they prisoners? Are we looking at a space preserved, or a space withheld? If we do not claim ownership over the land, does that mean we lose it? Or do we, in letting go, finally see it for what it truly is, free, boundless, interconnected? This painting resonates with hexagram 47, kun, oppression, exhaustion, a sign of limitation, confinement, and struggle. The landscape is barren, the trees sparse, the energy of the image one of restriction. The wire binding the trees mirrors the concept of feeling trapped or controlled by external forces. The stone weighing down the tree further emphasizes burden and struggle. The I Ching teaches that when one faces oppression, the true test is internal. Do we fight against the constraints, exhausting ourselves further? Or do we find a way to endure, to see beyond the restriction and find freedom within it? The trees are bound, yet they still grow. The land is claimed, yet it remains untouched. Ownership may be declared, but the earth itself does not recognize it. The lesson here is one of resilience. When faced with limitations, one must look inward for strength. Sometimes, what appears as a prison is only a state of mind. The Tao Te Ching speaks against the human tendency to divide, to control, to impose limits on what should remain boundless. The landscape in this painting was never meant to be owned. It was meant to be. The trees grow where they will. The sky stretches without concern for borders. The land shifts and erodes, unconcerned with its designation as private. To own something is to fear losing it. To divide the land is to separate oneself from it. The lesson here is simple. Let go. Stop clinging to what was never yours to begin with, the earth. We see this as a meditation on human constructs, ownership, property, division. The painting asks, what is truly ours? The trees have no concept of ownership, and yet they are bound by it. The land does not resist, and yet it is claimed. The absurdity of private property is that it exists only in human perception. This image is a reminder of how much we limit ourselves with artificial boundaries, not just physical, but mental. We define spaces, ideas, and even our own identities in ways that separate us from the world, rather than connect us to it. But the mind, like the landscape, is open. If we remove the ropes, the labels, the false burdens, what remains is freedom. We see this painting as a meditation on creativity itself. Art, like land, is often claimed, divided, owned. But true creativity is about breaking down walls, not building them. The best ideas, the most powerful expressions, come from a place of openness, of surrendering control. The trees in this painting may be bound, but they are still reaching. They are still alive. Creativity, too, can thrive even in constraint. The artist who feels confined must remember, the rope can be cut. The boundaries are not real. The greatest work comes when we realize that nothing, not even private property, can contain the spirit of creation. This painting is about illusion, the illusion of ownership, the illusion of separation, the illusion of permanence. The landscape exists regardless of its label. The trees grow whether they are bound or not. The land cannot be truly owned, just as the mind cannot be truly confined. But we live in a world of structures, of claims, of boundaries, and so we must navigate them. The key is to recognize them for what they are: temporary, arbitrary, and often self-imposed. The trees will one day break free. The land will continue to change. And the idea of private property will fade into memory. The real question is, do we recognize the illusion now, or do we wait until time erases it for us? Look at the boundaries in your own life. Where have you drawn lines that do not need to be there? What burdens have you tied yourself to, thinking they were necessary? What would it mean to untether yourself, to remove the ropes, to step beyond the label of private property and into something limitless? The land is waiting. The trees are still growing. The rope can be cut. All that remains is the choice. Will you take the step?